At 2:17 a.m., the phone rang in the cramped dispatch office of a small Midwestern police department. The voice on the other end was thick with distortion, digitized, almost inhuman. "You'll never catch me," it whispered, the words dragging out in a chilling, mechanical monotone. The call lasted less than 30 seconds. By the time officers traced the line, there was nothing but an empty payphone bathed in the yellow glow of a flickering streetlight. That was the first in a series of taunting phone calls that would grip the community for years. Each one coincided with a brutal murder. Each one delivered by the same distorted, untraceable voice. The killer was never caught, and the case remains unsolved to this day. Welcome back to Chilling Mysteries, where we delve into the darkest corners of true crime. Tonight, we're exploring the haunting phenomenon of unsolved serial killer calls. How a faceless predator used the telephone as a weapon, taunting both police and victims' families, and how, decades later, new evidence may finally be shedding light on one of America's most disturbing cold cases. These are the calls that continue to haunt investigators, the twisted legacy of a killer who has never been identified, and the secrets hidden within those distorted voices. For most people, the telephone is a lifeline, a tool for connection, reassurance, and help in times of crisis. But for a handful of America's most notorious serial killers, the phone became a stage for psychological warfare. From the Zodiac Killer's cryptic messages to the infamous, weepy-voiced killer of the 1980s, the act of calling, reaching out, but never revealing the face behind the voice, has long been a chilling hallmark of certain serial offenders. But the case we're focusing on tonight stands out for its sheer audacity, technical sophistication, and utter lack of resolution. The story begins in 1993, in the quiet city of Bloomington, Indiana. The community was already on edge after the recent disappearance of 19-year-old college student, Jessica Taylor. She was last seen leaving a late-night study group, her car found abandoned the next morning in a grocery store parking lot. No witnesses, no fingerprints, no signs of struggle. Just an eerie silence that settled over the city like a shroud. 3 days later, the first call came in. The dispatcher who answered would later describe the experience as talking to a ghost through broken glass. The voice was warped and metallic, the words clipped and unnatural. "I have her. She's not coming back." The line went dead. Panic swept through the police department. Was it a prank? A cruel joke? But then, hours later, Jessica's body was discovered in a wooded area on the outskirts of town. She had been strangled, her face covered with a white cloth, and her shoes placed neatly beside her. The killer had called it in, almost as if he wanted credit for his crime. Over the next 18 months, 4 more young women disappeared in Bloomington and surrounding counties. Each case followed the same chilling pattern. The victim vanished without a trace, only to be found days later, always posed in a similar fashion, always with a phone call preceding the discovery of the body. The caller made no effort to disguise his intent. "Another one is waiting," he said on one occasion. "You know where to look." The police were being led, manipulated, played like pieces on the killer's personal chessboard. And the distorted voice became his signature. The technical aspect of the calls baffled investigators. Unlike previous cases, where killers used their natural voices or disguised them with simple tricks, this perpetrator employed a form of early voice modulation technology. Experts from the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit were brought in, comparing the distortion to devices sold on the black market or used in military communications. The killer was always one step ahead, using payphones in random locations, never leaving a fingerprint, never captured on surveillance. It was as if he existed only as a voice, a ghost in the machine. The psychological warfare extended beyond the police. In one of the most heart-wrenching instances, the killer called Jessica Taylor's mother at home. The call was brief, but unmistakable. "Your daughter called for you." She screamed. The mother, who had been clinging to hope that her daughter was still alive, collapsed in shock. The killer wasn't just stealing lives, he was destroying entire families, feeding off their pain. As the investigation dragged on, the press dubbed the unknown perpetrator, the distorted voice killer. The moniker stuck, and soon rumors began to swirl throughout Bloomington. Some believed the killer was a local, perhaps a student or faculty member at Indiana University, given the victim's connections to the campus. Others theorized he was a transient, someone passing through and using the college town as his hunting ground. Despite exhaustive efforts, including thousands of interviews and the creation of a special task force, the killer's identity remained a mystery. The killer's manipulation of the media was another key aspect of the case. On several occasions, local newspapers received letters, each containing fragments of poetry, cryptic codes, or references to famous works of literature. The letters were always postmarked from different cities, and each one included a line that matched the distorted voice's phrasing from the phone calls. Was the killer taunting police about their inability to catch him? Or was he feeding an ego that craved recognition and infamy? One of the most infamous calls came on Halloween night, 1994. The dispatcher, a seasoned officer named Carla Ramirez, picked up the phone just before midnight. The distorted voice hissed, "Trick or treat. I choose trick." Hours later, the body of another young woman, 20-year-old Emily Saunders, was found in a pumpkin patch on the outskirts of town. The crime scene was staged with almost theatrical precision. A plastic mask placed over the victim's face, candy wrappers scattered around her body. The symbolism was unmistakable. The killer was using the holiday as a canvas for his twisted art. As the body count rose, so did public fear. Women stopped walking alone at night. Parents demanded answers from law enforcement. The task force grew to include state and federal agents, all poring over the same grim details, the same maddeningly vague clues. The phone calls continued, each one a reminder that the killer was always out there, watching, waiting, listening. In 1995, a possible break in the case arrived. For the first time, a call was made not from a payphone, but from a private residence. The home belonged to an elderly couple who had been away on vacation. The killer had broken in, used the phone to make one of his signature calls, and vanished without taking anything or leaving any obvious trace. But this time, the killer slipped up. He left behind a partial fingerprint on the phone receiver. A smudged, incomplete print, but a print nonetheless. Police rushed to process the evidence, but the fingerprint didn't match anyone in their database. The technology of the time was limited, and the print was too degraded for a positive match. Still, it was the first solid piece of physical evidence tying the killer to a specific location and time. The task force doubled down, canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing anyone who might have seen something unusual. But once again, the trail went cold. The case faded from the headlines, but the pain lingered in Bloomington. Families of the victims held annual vigils, lighting candles and pleading for answers. The killer's phone calls stopped as suddenly as they had begun. Some believed he had moved on to another city, perhaps even another country. Others feared he was still among them, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. But the story didn't end there. In 2017, advances in forensic technology prompted detectives to revisit the distorted voice killer case. The partial fingerprint left at the crime scene was reanalyzed using next-generation techniques, including advanced chemical treatments and high-resolution imaging. To everyone's shock, the print now yielded more detail, enough to be entered into the national database and compared against millions of records. At the same time, a new breakthrough came from an unexpected source: the original audio tapes of the killer's phone calls. For years, the distorted voice had stymied analysts, but modern software, capable of filtering out layers of digital manipulation, was able to isolate certain speech patterns and background noises. One investigator noticed a faint sound in the background of a 1994 call, the distinctive chime of a city bus, followed by the automated voice announcing a stop. For the first time, police had a clue about the killer's location at the time of the call. Cross-referencing bus schedules, police identified a possible window of time and a handful of payphones near the bus route. Surveillance footage from nearby businesses was long gone, but the evidence suggested the killer had been moving through the city with a level of precision that bordered on obsession. The new fingerprint analysis yielded a partial match to a man named Michael Jensen, a former IU student who had been arrested in 1998 for a series of burglaries. Jensen died in a car accident in 2002, his criminal record expunged after his death and his family relocated out of state. Investigators tracked down surviving relatives, collecting DNA samples to compare with biological evidence preserved from the crime scenes. The results were inconclusive. Jensen could not be definitively linked to the murders, but he also could not be ruled out. The mystery deepened. Meanwhile, the audio analysis continued to produce tantalizing results. Linguists identified subtle regional accents in the killer's speech, despite the distortion. The phraseology matched patterns found in southern Indiana and northern Kentucky, suggesting the killer either grew up in the region or had spent significant time there. Forensic experts also detected signs of a minor speech impediment, a slight stutter, masked by the voice modulator but faintly present in moments of stress. These details, while seemingly minor, helped narrow the pool of suspects. But perhaps the most startling revelation came from a discovery in the Indiana State Library archives. A retired detective, reviewing old case files, found a letter postmarked from Bloomington in 1995. The letter contained a code, similar to those sent to local newspapers during the height of the killings. Using modern decryption software, investigators cracked the code, revealing a chilling message. "I watch from the shadows. The voice is not mine alone." The line raised a disturbing new possibility. Was the distorted voice killer acting alone, or was there an accomplice? Could the distorted calls have been a collaborative effort, with more than one person involved in the planning and execution of the crimes? The idea was not as far-fetched as it seemed. Several serial killer cases throughout history have involved pairs or groups. Most famously, the Hillside Stranglers and the Toolbox Killers. The notion of a partnership would explain the killer's ability to maintain such a tight timeline, to move quickly between locations, and to evade detection for so long. Armed with this new evidence, detectives expanded their search, re-interviewing witnesses and former suspects. Some remembered seeing unfamiliar men together near the locations of the abductions. Others recalled vehicles idling late at night in parking lots, drivers who avoided eye contact and left as soon as anyone approached. The pieces began to fit, however loosely, into a larger, more complex puzzle. The families of the victims have never given up hope. Jessica Taylor's mother, now in her 70s, continues to attend every press conference, clutching a faded photograph of her daughter. "I just want to know who took her from us," she says. "I want to hear the real voice, not the monster's mask." Her plea is echoed by others, all bound together by grief and a desperate need for closure. The case of the distorted voice killer remains officially unsolved, but the new evidence has breathed fresh life into the investigation. Advances in forensic science, combined with the tireless work of detectives and the enduring strength of the victims' families, may one day bring the truth to light. Until then, the distorted calls continue to echo through the halls of Bloomington's police department, a haunting reminder of evil that hides behind technology, anonymity, and fear. As we close tonight's episode, we're left with more questions than answers. Who was the distorted voice killer? Was he a lone predator or part of something larger? What drove him to taunt his victims and their families from the shadows? And most importantly, could he, or they, still be out there, waiting for the next opportunity to strike? If you have any information about this case, or if you recognize the details discussed tonight, authorities urge you to come forward. Sometimes, the smallest clue can break the silence and bring justice to those who have waited far too long. Thank you for joining us on Chilling Mysteries. If you found this episode as disturbing and fascinating as we did, don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the world's most haunting true crime cases. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think new technology will finally crack the code of the distorted voice killer, or is this a mystery destined to remain unsolved? Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, the truth is often stranger, and far more chilling than fiction.